noting that you came from Uzbekistan to Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's
Well,
any coincidence.
That is a coincidence because I didn't have anything to do with the earlier one. Anyway.
All right, I've had enough fun here. I'll ask everyone if you'll state your name and your affiliation before you give your question. Now, before you had your hand waving.
Thank you. Nabahor Imamova from the Voice of America. It's great to have you here. You have now closely worked with two reform promising regimes in Central Asia. I think you can answer this question. What major differences and similarities do you see between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan? And also, more directly, is Tokayev really reform-minded? And by that I mean systemic reforms. Do you see the system evolving, changing?
Wow. That's a big question, Nabor. Both parts of it. And I'll try. I mean, I want to give everyone lots of other questions a chance, so I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, it has been interesting to see, the kind of the similarities and differences in two different places. When I arrived in Tashkent, it was already a couple of years into the reform process, and I think that, maybe things were slowing down or running into the low-hanging fruit had already been harvested, and it was running into more difficult, more complex reforms.
What year was that?
2019 when I arrived there. So it was like 2 years into the President Mirziyoyev's reforms. But and so I guess I was there for the slowing down part of it, and I know that was, it was at times frustrating for some people, and maybe for some felt like it was a lack of commitment. To me, it was a lot of it was about just, again, running into these things that were more difficult to achieve, not just because they were more complicated, but because there was more resistance, from different parts of the structure. Kazakhstan has a very different history of reform because there's been repeated reforms, and those probably were some announced when you were there. I mean, it's like, when President Nazarbayev was in charge, I can recall following the region even from more of a distance, that every 3 or 4 years there was some new reform program. And I think, probably each one of them incrementally made some progress, but also left other things undone. And I think that the things that President Tokayev announced in the wake of the 2022 unrest were focused heavily on the political side. And I think from the government's perspective, most of those reforms have already been implemented. They had to do with constitutional changes in the electoral system, holding the presidential and then parliamentary election. Some of them there are some longer term things that have to do with decentralization, giving more power to the local government, more resources and more authority to local government, and that's still unfolding. There's a hearty debate internationally, certainly, but even in Kazakhstan, about whether the political reforms of that first year were significant or changed anything in terms of the kind of political power balance, so to speak. I do think that the jury is still out, and that we have to give some time to see. Of course, one of the most significant things that President Tokayev himself talks about a lot is the 7-year presidential term, the once and only once 7-year presidential term. And you maybe saw that just like a day or two ago in an interview, he was asked about that, and he emphatically said, "I'm done after 7 years, and that's it." The other part of reform in Kazakhstan, economic reform, there was really not a lot. When I got there wasn't much focus or talk about it. In September last year, September 2023, in the President's State of the Nation address, he made it clear that in the coming year, the focus would be on economic reform, and he laid out a pretty ambitious slate of reforms. A lot of them having to do with, it's still, a lot of it is things coming from the state developing the economy. There was some talk about more privatization, but there was less focus on that. There was more focus on developing value chains in certain sectors, protecting domestic producers, but also attracting foreign investment, especially to mining and critical minerals, and setting some pretty ambitious targets for financial sector, like attracting foreign banks to the financial sector and attracting and increasing IT exports from Kazakhstan. So all of those were all elements of the president's goals for the coming year, and it was very economically focused. So it remains to be seen how that's going to all unfold. But I would just say that it's going back to the origin of the question, the beginning of your question, I think the difference is that the reform, the sense of what reform means in Kazakhstan is somehow different, because it's been this kind of repeated effort to change things over time, which has gone to a certain point and not further, as opposed to what was really like a sea change, kind of a watershed in Uzbekistan, where suddenly the closed system was opened up. So that to me, that's what feels the most different.
Fair enough. Yes, please.